My fellow Crusaders, welcome to the Mark II Knight Helmet tutorial. In my showcase video for this helmet, it was heavily requested that I make a full-length tutorial, and so in the description you'll find some templates that you can download to follow along. And here is the helmet in question. If you haven't seen my last video, this one has a solid faceplate, and so the back actually hinges open. Tears off on some Velcro straps, and then you can pull it open like that and put your head in. I figured that since this was my first full-length tutorial ever, if this video gets 1 million likes, then I'll commit ritual seppuku for the first time in 10 generations. I'll live stream this on my channel, so make sure to stay tuned for that and definitely like this video. Without further ado, put on your most wholesome smile, get some strong ale, and let's get into it. And also download those templates in the description. And speaking of those templates, once you have them downloaded, make sure to click on them, go to the PDF area, press print, and then you're going to go down to the print options. You're going to select more settings. And then you're going to hit 102 as your size. Do not do actual size or fit to print area. They won't print out big enough. 102 is perfect. Except I have a small head, so be open to experimentation. Once you have them printed out, you're going to tape part A and B together, cutting along the solid lines and then taping them with a slight overlap. You don't want to touch those dotted lines yet because those mark where the cardboard is going to overlap when you're putting the whole thing together. That same rule is going to apply to all of these templates, so only cut the solid lines at first. We're going to cut the dotted lines later when we're copying them down. Also note that most of these templates have this double arrow and then it says symmetrical. That indicates that you're going to mirror the template and then copy it down again to make one bigger template. Same thing for part G, I just forgot to write symmetrical, but yeah, this one is going to be mirrored as well. And also punch out that hole. That's going to be where we put our rivet. Some of them, like part E, got a little cut off, so you just have to fill in the lines. And then you cut out part C, D, and E. This hole on part C is just a reference, so don't actually punch this out yet. And now all of your cutout templates should look something like this. And if you remember when I said that most of these were going to be mirrored and then copied down again, that specifically is this one, this one, this one, and this one. Now we can lay all of those out onto cardboard and make sure that we have enough room for everything. And these three lines in every single piece show the direction that the corrugation should be going. A little bit of tape to hold it down while we copy it, and then we just start penciling all of that in. With that all down, it's finally time to start cutting out these dotted lines. Once you have all of them cut out, you're going to recopy that down onto a piece of cardboard so that the cardboard now has the dotted lines. In this way, when we're putting it all together, we know how far the cardboard should overlap. These dotted lines go on the eyepiece, the back plate, again with that hole punched in there. And then we can finally start cutting out all of that cardboard. And be especially careful when you're cutting out these eyepieces because it's very easy to slip and mess them up. After all that, you should have every single template cut out and marked correctly. And now we can actually move on to the fun part, which is making the helmet. We're going to start with parts A and B to create the skull cap, and every single piece in this video is going to follow a very similar process. First, we're going to roll it out to flatten it. Some channels will tell you to score your cardboard to make it fold better for some reason. I don't know. That weakens it, so just roll it out, it makes it super flexible, and you get the best of both worlds. With its new level of flexibility, we can start actually overlapping it and pressing it into shape. Once you have it folded up to those dotted lines, we can start the glue up. A very common mistake that I see beginners making is they use way more hot glue than is necessary. That leads to the final product looking really messy, so remember that you only need enough hot glue to cover the area where the two pieces are making contact. Once you glue all of these overlaps together, make sure to mirror this piece and then make a second so that we can glue it together to make the full skull cap. To start that out, I just glued together the back end to end. If we were to glue every single seam together right now, it would be way too small, so we're going to expand it a little. To start that out, we're going to glue on part C, which is that rectangular eyepiece. We're going to glue it together with just a little glue on one end and then a little bit of glue on the other. Once that glue dries, we can do the first test fit of the helmet, and notice how there's a huge ridge here that isn't filled in. I know it looks stupid, just wait. The first step to making it look less stupid is we have to fill in that gap. But just before that, wherever the helmet touched while you still had your head in, you can glue that, but leave the rest empty for now. We're also going to glue in that eyepiece, but again, we leave that gap empty. Because we're going to fill it in with this piece, which is about an inch and a half wide, just wide enough to fill in that gap when we glue it in from behind. And make sure that when you do glue it in, it makes it so that that gap is just as wide as it was as when you had your head inside, which should guarantee a pretty good fit. Fortunately, for this glue up, it doesn't have to be pretty because it's all going to get covered up anyways in the final product. To complete the skull cap, just add a little strip of cardboard at the back to reinforce it. And now you have the hardest part of the project finally done. And at this stage, you can turn it into pretty much any helmet you want, but we're going to continue with the Mark II Night Helmet, starting with the part that makes up the top of the muzzle. As with every piece before, we're going to start out by rolling it to make it more flexible. The glue up for this is a little tricky, so I like to start with a tiny dab of hot glue in the center. Once you have it fixed to that and that glue is dried, you can start gluing up the left and right. It's all just glued end to end on both sides, so it should be pretty straightforward, just make sure that it's secure. And for this mouthpiece, same thing, we're going to start by rolling it all out, but you're going to hold off on the glue up until you put the breathing holes in. You can do pretty much whatever you want design-wise, but I'm just going to do some holes that fall down in a diagonal. And to start that, I'm marking out some room in the center where I don't want the holes to go. But just before I cut those out, I'm going to cut a line on the little extra piece that we left for the chin. And I call it the chin piece because later on when we have this glued, we're going to fold it along the line that was marked on the template, and that's going to make the chin. And to draw those holes in, I'm going to make 4 holes that are equally distanced apart, and then make diagonal lines parallel to that ridge of cardboard. These lines are going to be used to mark every other hole. And a useful tip for spacing these out correctly is to use the corrugation of the cardboard as a kind of ruler. If you want to copy this design exactly, every single hole is 1.5 centimeters apart. And finally, with a leather hole punch and all of our holes marked, we can start punching them out. If you don't have a leather hole punch, you can use a knife to start a hole and then use a pencil to round it out. Once we have all of those holes copied down on the other side, we're good to glue it on. There's not too much to this glue up, you just make sure that it's symmetrical on both sides and then paste it on. Once you do have it on there, we can finally start working on the chin piece. To start, we're going to do 2 cuts with our scissors just like we did in the middle. This cut is 2 lines of corrugation to the left of the bend at the top, and then the reverse of that for the cut on the other side of the helmet. You're going to overlap the cardboard around these 3 cuts to bend the chin piece in and then glue it in place. With that done, we can move on to the visor, which are going to be accented with these 2 little eyepieces that we cut out earlier. As it says on the template, you're going to cut the top 2 layers of this piece of cardboard but leave the bottom one. That way you can peel off the top 2 layers while the bottom one is still left attached. This step is just an extra detail, so feel free to cut through the whole thing if you want to. These pieces just get glued directly on, and note that I didn't use a rolling pin on them because I want them to stand out. In this next step, we're going to put the back plate on. And to do that, we're going to mark this template where that little hole is, but that's just going to be a reference. Don't actually punch that hole out. This is just that we can get our bearings on where the back plate should kind of relatively go. To mark the actual hole that we're going to punch out, you're going to put the helmet on and then wrap the back plate around your head. First, you have to make sure that it lines up in a way that looks good and fits your head, while still leaving enough room for it to be able to pivot back so we can put our head in. Once you have it where you want it, make sure to mark that hole. And then make sure that those 2 holes are big enough to thread paracord through. For the piece of paracord itself, you're going to melt the end a lot, like as much as possible before it actually droops off. And then you're going to smush that end down into the table as much as possible. You want to get that end super flat so that you can thread it into the helmet without it actually touching your head, which would be uncomfortable. Just like that. And then that's going to be the piece that's inside of the actual helmet. You'll also want to add this little circle of reinforcement to the inside of the back plate before threading the piece of paracord through the inside of the helmet and then through the back plate. You then tie it off in a knot, do it to the other side, and then cut off the excess, and you're done with rivets. You then do the bottom of the back plate where you cut all of the excess material into little slits so that it can fold nicely into the back plate. Once all of that was glued on, I decided to crimp it at this little edge to make it look cooler. And now we've just got the top of the back plate left. You just smack it on where those dotted lines are and then bend in the top and glue it in place. The only thing we have left to do structure-wise is add Velcro straps to the sides to lock that back plate in place. Lucky for you, I have an entire video dedicated to how to install Velcro straps so that they're strong and don't tear out over time. So if you can find it within yourself to excuse the blatant self-promo, I do think that the methods described in this video are the best for getting these straps on. Once those are on, you are done, and I added some ridges to the front and then a feather plume. Those are just extra details. You can do really whatever you want from this point to style the helmet up. Thank you all so much for watching, and know that I love and cherish every single one of my viewers. Remember that being yourself is always awesome, and killing yourself has always been lame. Unless it's